How's it going, everyone? My name is George, and today we are starting the Thor review series leading up to Thor Love and Thunder with the first Thor film, Thor. This came out in 2011, directed by Kenneth Branagh, and stars Chris Hemsworth as Thor, and Tom Hiddleston as Loki, Anthony Hopkins as Odin, and Natalie Portman as Jane Foster. And this was the fourth MCU film to come out. This also came out in a year where we got other comic book movies that were significant, like X-Men First Class, Captain America the First Avenger. I remember 2011 being a pretty big year for films in general, not just for those films, but I remember Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows Part 2 coming out, Transformers Dark of the Moon, Sherlock Holmes A Game of Shadows. A lot of movies came out that year, and Thor is also in that mix. And this is the origin story, or more so about how Thor learned to be worthy of his powers. Because in this film, Thor is pretty arrogant, and he tries to start a war, and it lands up going pretty bad for him. And Odin exiles him to Earth and sends his hammer down to Earth. And basically, we got our fish out of water story because Thor is now among the people of Earth. So I remember when I first saw Thor, I wasn't really expecting much. I've never been a big Thor person, but when I saw it, I thought this was a pretty good movie, and today I still think it's a pretty good movie. Like I said, this is the fourth film in the MCU, and the MCU was still kind of looking for its footing at the time. The only other films that came out were Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, and Iron Man 2. And those films were much more grounded and I guess you can say more realistic compared to Thor, which is more fantasy based. So, like, this was like their first time kind of exploring the more mythical fantasy aspect of the MCU. And we've seen now today we've explored that more with not just more Thor films, but also like movies like Doctor Strange going into the more mythical fantasy aspect of the MCU. But yeah, this was also, like I said, this was directed by Kenneth Branagh, who is known for directing and starring in many films based off of popular William Shakespeare plays. So this definitely has a Shakespearean tone to it. It feels more Shakespearean, and I mean, compared to the next Thor movies that would come out, it definitely feels a lot different. The style is obviously much more different. And I don't mind the Shakespearean tone because it does fit at many times. There's a lot of dramatic moments, particularly when Loki finds out about his heritage. So, as far as the acting goes, Chris Hemsworth is pretty good. However, to me, the best performance in this film was easily Tom Hiddleston as Loki. This was by far the best villain of Phase 1. For a while, the best villain in the MCU. And for a while, it felt like he was the gold standard for MCU villains. Now, we've gotten more good MCU villains down the road. But yeah, for a while, he was one of the best. And it starts a really good character arc for both Thor and Loki. Because as you see these characters grow in the MCU, like a lot's gonna happen with these characters down the road. So I feel like this was a pretty good start for their character arcs. In this film, basically Thor's got some arrogance to him, and he needs to learn how to earn those powers. He's got to learn to a be a hero that he was meant to be. Like he's got the powers, he's got the status of being a god, but he's not ready to be king, even though Odin wants him to be king. Anthony Hopkins as Odin is also very good. Idris Elba as Heimdall is also very good. Natalie Portman as Jane Foster is also pretty good, although as far as like the Earth characters go, I would say the character Darcy, played by Kate Dennings, is probably the most interesting Earth character in this entire film. Oh, then you also got Clark Gregg playing Agent Coulson again. He's got a bigger role in this film than he did in Iron Man 2. So he's pretty good in this film as well. It's good to see him. Jeremy Renner makes his first unofficial brief appearance as Hawkeye in this film. So like this film does also set up a lot of stuff because as well, but it's not like one of those like typical setup films where it spends a lot of time setting up the next film. It's basically setting up what's to come for the Avengers with the antagonist, with Thor's story, and also more involvement from Shield when the Avengers come along. Now, as far as the pacing goes with this film, I feel like when we're on Asgard, the Asgard stuff is much quicker paced. It's much more interesting. It's the best stuff about this film. when Thor's on Earth, I feel like that's when the film slows down. I'm not saying everything about when Thor is on Earth is bad. When he's like taking down shield agents to get his hammer, that's pretty cool action to see. There's some funny moments, especially when he wants another drink and he like smashes the mug. And then when he wants a horse from the pet store and he's asking for like a cat or a dog that's big enough to ride. Like there's some funny moments in there, but it just always feels like when it comes to the Thor movies, particularly the first two Thor films, the Earth stuff really holds back the Thor films to a certain extent. It's like the Asgard stuff is some really cool stuff, but then when we're on Earth, it's not terrible, but it's not that interesting either. So I really feel like that hurts the film. Compared to like some of the other MCU movies, this is pretty short. Not like real short, but shorter than other MCU movies. And I feel like with like stakes like Thor, because this is obviously the first film that doesn't take place all the time on Earth. This takes place sometimes in Asgard. I would feel like especially with how significant this is going to be to the Avengers, it feels like this is a film that probably could have been longer as well. Like I feel like it covers enough ground, but at the same time, with I feel like Thor has always been a bigger stakes franchise than some of the other franchises. When it can, particularly like the Iron Man and like Captain America franchises, because they're a lot more grounded on Earth and like they deal much more with like terrorists, like in Hydra threats, where Thor deals with more so threats that are threats to Earth and other worlds. And when it comes to the first films for these MCU characters like Iron Man, the Incredible Hulk, Thor, and Captain America, the First Avenger, while I like this movie quite a bit, I feel like it's also the weakest of those movies. Now, I know some people might disagree with me on that. They might say, oh, the Incredible Hulk's the weakest, but I always feel like the Incredible Hulk has always been an underrated MCU film, in my opinion. And I know some people forget that's even an MCU film because it's quite different from most MCU films. But even if like let's take like the Incredible Hulk out of the equation, I always feel like the first Iron Man and Captain America, the first Avenger, have just been much more sorry, been much more interesting origin story films for our Phase One heroes. Now I've already reviewed the first Iron Man film, so you can see my thoughts in that review. But I always felt like Captain America: The First Avenger, which also came out this year, was just a much more interesting, much more entertaining, and balanced superhero origin film that I think did things right. I think the only thing Thor got better than the first Avenger was having a much better villain in Tom Hiddleston's Loki compared to Hugo Weaving's Red Skull. And I thought Red Skull was a pretty good villain in First Avenger, but Loki's still much better villain. But yeah, because I know there's some people that might prefer the first Thor film over First Avenger. That's fine. We all have our different opinions, but I just feel like Thor isn't up there with Iron Man and Captain America: The First Avenger. But all in all, with the first Thor film, I still enjoy this movie. I don't want to seem like I'm hanging on this movie because I don't. The action's very good. The special effects are great. The score, I think this has a great score in my opinion. The Shakespearean tone, I do enjoy the Shakespearean feel of the movie. The performances, I think, are still very good. Although Tom Hiddleston's Loki is the best performance. I felt like it kind of takes a while for Chris Hemsworth to really get into the Thor character, and he's even admitted that at a certain point he was starting to get bored with the character until like Thor Ragnarok came along. But even still, I do enjoy this film. It's probably like my second or maybe third to least favorite film in Phase One. I don't know. I still prefer Incredible Hulk by a little bit. I do like Incredible Hulk quite a bit. But with the first Thor film, I'm going to give it a B. I highly recommend you check it out if you haven't, because it's still important to the MCU. This is the first Thor film. It's also the film with Loki in it, and it basically sets up the stage for the MCU going forward, with not just the Avengers, but like other movies. And it's also the first MCU movie that gets into that fantasy and mythical stuff, as well as telling stories that are also off of Earth, because the other three MCU films that came out, like I said, are more grounded and more realistic, although what's realistic about a giant green monster smashing stuff, but it's a much more grounded story, you can say. But yeah, what do you guys think about the first Thor film? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you think it's a lot better than most people assume? I know there's some people that will say the first Thor film is their favorite Thor movie because there's some people out there that don't love Ragnarok, although I will review Ragnarok down the road. But yeah, what do you guys think about the first Thor film? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Is it your favorite Phase 1 film or your least favorite Phase 1 film? Let me know in the comments down below, and I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe already if you haven't. Please share this with someone that likes the Thor films, that likes MCU films, and I hope to see you guys real soon. The next review will be Thor the Dark World. That will be an interesting review. And I do apologize if I have to clear my throat a lot. My throat has been on and off lately, but it's getting better. But anyways, I hope to see you guys real soon. Take care, everyone.